The DickHeads are presented in color.
Hey, dickheads, like a pink laser beam of truth, beaming from Portland, Lakeside, and San Diego, California to your brain hole. I am your personal dickhead, David Agranoff. But we have a returning dickhead, the person who conceived of this podcast out of his brain hole. Anthony Trevino, welcome back to the DickHeads Podcast.
Thank you. Welcome to the Running Man, I guess.
Yeah. We're here today because I fucked up the recording of the last attempt I did at an interview with Cody that we did live on the Dick Hangout, the PKD Hangout, which I should mention happens every Tuesday, most Tuesdays, and has a different live guest every Tuesday night. And you can join us live for that. We generally talk a little bit about, we talk about PKD and how it relates to the whoever the guest is. We've had people that grow quantum brains. We've had people who are philosophy experts, robotics experts, and just writers who like PKD. So you can find that. So I originally interviewed Cody about this book there, and it's a long story, but I fucked up the recording. So we get to do a longer form interview, which is good because we get Anthony involved because he's a big fan of this book as well. So we're going to talk about Cody's new book. And Cody has been on the DickHeads Podcast before, at least once. You were here for our Simulacra episode.
Indeed.
And back in the day, early in the podcast. And we're here to promote this book, New Tomorrow. He's got you guys got official ones. I have the advanced one. So
you got to hold the book in front of the camera, David. You got to hold the whole
like
book.
that.
There you go.
We've all got copies of this massive tome. First off, if people are new to you, Cody, let's give an introduction into Cody Goodfellow, the author. Like, what's your journey towards science fiction and Philip K. Dick?
Philip K. Dick was a formative author for me and a transformative author who, like a lot of people, when I first discovered his work, I hunted down everything that I could find, and he came along at a pivotal time. I mean, I got dropped off at a multiplex to see E.T., and so it was sold out. So we snuck into Blade Runner instead, so that kind of planted a seed that narratives could be so much more, and it called into question the whole notion of what narrative is, because it in writing stories where people are dealing with and questioning the nature of a reality that they're finding themselves trapped in, it begs the question of how narrative is a ersatz reality created by a kind of amateur demiurge as a rejection of the real world. And so it kind of influenced not just the kind of stories that I write and the way that I write them, but also my relationship to an understanding of what fiction does as a refuge or as an escape or a repudiation of the real world. He's kind of always been there as a pole. I suppose the other pole would probably be H.P. Lovecraft. Throughout my longer form works, I've tried to kind of engage with that notion of reality, the plasticity of reality, and the realities that we choose to live in as these weird little imaginary bubbles. And it informs a lot of my most influential work, and there's kind of a lot of Philip K. Dick at work in New Tomorrow, particularly with regard to the antagonists.
One of the things that I like about your fiction that is something that I think a lot of Dickians kind of subconsciously attach to their experience reading Philip K. Dick is there's a certain edge of intelligence meets danger, um, where like there's kind of a loose cannon type of attitude towards reality. And one of the things that I think makes PKD different is that it's like a highly educated person is writing like the same kind of exegesis that the guy walking down the street with a notebook, homeless, might write. Right?
Right. And that is a thing. I mean, in that respect, all narrative fiction now is kind of a relic. But at one time, when there was less competition, every railroad brakeman had, the Shadow or Doc Savage or True Confessions pulp book in his hip pocket, and it was a pocket reality. And a lot of soldiers first discovered like H.P. Lovecraft because there were armed forces editions that were slipped in alongside their rations and their cigarettes when they went overseas into a combat zone. And I kind of try to stay true to that notion, because I recognize that anybody who's still reading fiction at all, let alone new fiction, is kind of an anachronism and kind of a mutant. And to meet those people where they live, down in their weird subterranean nests, is kind of key.
Well, and if we look at some of your past work, like Perfect Union or Rainbow Shark, just taking two of your novels, is that they both kind of have this kind of serrated edge to like the storytelling, whereas unfortunately I mean, it's one of the reasons why it's those are attractive works to, for example, me and Anthony, whereas they might be a tougher sell for a larger commercial market. But it's one of the things that I think we find really attractive about your work is that it feels a little dangerous reading it compared to, like, say, a Dean Koontz. Right.
Right. Well, it begs the question to me. I mean, and maybe my instincts are all wired for failure, but to me, it seems like the thing that I remember having read on vacation, I want to remember that. I don't want to just be looking at something. There was a thriller, and I thought the guy was going to die, but then he didn't. Whoa, and he exposed the big secret too. Whoop-de-doo. But you don't remember it. And reading a book is so much more of a commitment and an engagement, and it offers to put your imagination into the service of this guided dream. And so when you're reading something that you suddenly get a weird chill and you're just like, God, I hope nobody knows I'm reading this. That's so much more exciting. And why would you just read something that's just a place to park your eyes and your brain more or less in neutral for any number of days? I feel like people that are still coming to us and inviting us into their heads and offering us the chance to entertain them they deserve more. And there are still things that prose can do that no other form of entertainment can. And I think we need to do the absolute living hell out of that while they're still paying attention, while they still have brains enough to process a book.
Yeah. And we should say for our listeners, if I would hope we got the word out about you, Cody, before, but if we didn't, this is not your first rodeo. You have more than a dozen books that people can go back and explore. And I want to pull Anthony into the conversation here too, because and talk a little bit about Anthony's journey discovering Cody Goodfellow as a writer. Like, what was your experience with that, Anthony? Can you share that with people?
What, discovering Cody?
Yeah. Not the dude, the body of work.
I read a short story in Cemetery Dance, which was Wasted on the Young, and it was fucking incredible. It was exactly the type of kind of angle to horror that I've always wanted to read, where like, yeah, it's horror, but it's not really like, you don't get to the end and they're like, tentacles. It's not Tales from the Crypt episode per se, but it was just incredibly unique. The voice was incredibly intelligent and witty, and that whole story fucking rips. It's my favorite short story to this day.
It's one of my favorites of Cody's too.
And from there, I was like, oh, I looked Cody up online. I saw that Radiant Dawn and Ravenous Dusk were already out, so I grabbed those. Yeah, and kind of the rest is history. I've been pretty hooked ever since. I don't think I've ever missed a book.
I also discovered Cody through Cemetery Dance, but an earlier Cemetery Dance experience, which was John Skip's article where he first kind of introduced you to the world. All right, so let's get into New Tomorrow, and we'll stay spoiler free for a bit. And one of the reasons, and I felt the need to bring this up when we talked about it during the PKD Hangout, is that my personal relationship to this story is that more than a decade ago, I was, you were telling me that this was a project you were working on. There are two books in your oeuvre that I have that experience with, which is Un-America and New Tomorrow, are both books that you had very long gestation periods. This happens to everybody. Ring of Fire is one I worked on for 13 years, for example, like off and on. And, that's pretty normal for some of us who don't have like giant contracts, right?
Yeah.
And so New Tomorrow is one that has been edging around in your brain. And I get the feeling that you were wanting to kind of, in the beginning, mix the superhero feeling of, like an alternate superhero feeling of a Watchmen-like type thing with a pulp alternate history, or like a pulp sci-fi feeling. Is that what was the original impetus for New Tomorrow?
Well, as you astutely pointed out, I think it's going on 18 years now. 18 years ago was when I first came up with the idea for New Tomorrow and started writing it. But I knew, even as I started writing it, that it was an idea I did not yet have the skill set to handle and execute. And so I did put it aside and do several other projects, but I started on it in like 2006, 2007. And you can tell kind of if you read the first three chapters with a critical eye and then you proceed onto the book, because the first three chapters are kind of like the double-sized origin issue of each of the principal characters. It's kind of their formative moment, told in toto and as a self-contained story. And then it proceeds with juggling four characters and a few other side characters for the rest of a rather long novel. And it was not lost on me that doing an homage to the pulps, which were notoriously lean but also very fast, like every month you could get an entirely self-contained The Shadow novel. And Gibson kept that up for like 300 plus books. I don't train spot me on that number, but it was an astounding volume of books. But each book was short and lightning fast. And to do something kind of, I was torn between, I wanted to do an homage to the pulps, but also I was very struck by Chabon's Cavalier and Clay, and the way that it gave it this epic grandeur, which managed to impart the love that we still feel for this kind of stuff, and give it the luster that it deserves, and not making it quick and cheap, the conditions under which it was created. And there will be genius moments and scenes and flex in there, but they're kind of incidental to the process, which is sort of like grinding out sausage. And so I wanted to make this grand, big, fat thing that dealt with and conveyed the excitement of pulp, but at the same time also it's kind of like making it into a museum piece, but without like just trapping it in amber and making it this static, dull thing. And striking that balance was something I had to do a lot of other works before I could come back around to and commit to it. And it wasn't until the lockdown in 2020 that I resolved that, okay, one way or another, I'm going to figure this out, how to tell this thing. And I was jamming on that every day and getting a chapter at least done every day. And then hit a wall and relationship issues and stuff. And I lost my Portland privileges and I moved back down to San Diego. And it was almost kind of like a Beethoven thing where I had to figure out how to finish composing this symphony when I could no longer hear music. For a while, I was several months kind of in a cage of depression, and realizing I had always known Un-America and New Tomorrow were my big books in my head for over a decade, and Un-America I knew was this very iconoclastic, harsh thing that I had to get out of my system, the thing I had to tell. But New Tomorrow was always the shining light beyond that, the place where I wanted to take people, the place I wanted to go. And writing it was a joy until my life, ripped the rug out from under me and I had to kind of start over. And I finished it in kind of a weird fog. And I revisited it and edited it, very rigorously to restore a balance. And yet I feel like that effect, life is going to affect your work. That's why the edge will always have on AI writing, right? Is that we have bodies and we have lives. They're only looking over other people's shoulders to explain what life is like because they'll never have one until we're all extinct, but
right.
If our lives shape those things, I think it was a necessary ingredient to making the story what it finally was, because I was drawn to that historical period because it was the point in which America became the light of the world, in military might and in culture and excitement and everybody first and in motion pictures and music and everything that we transmitted around the world. We became the with it place, and our sense of hubris was so preposterously overinflated, and we were writing for a fall and ended up creating one in a way that, almost looking at it in hindsight, we're almost like the Aztecs. Like we created the crash through harnessing all of these inevitable factors, not least of which was our own pride and belief in the infallibility of capitalism and the market. And when it failed us, it left us in this existential fog. It wasn't just an economic depression. The nation lost its mainspring and had to rediscover it. And we seem to be falling on the same sword right now. And I didn't seek out I can tell this story because it's relevant now. At the time, it seemed like an escapist thing, but I was being, manipulated by forces beyond my control. And some, seek out relevance, some have relevance thrust upon them. But I think I think it ends up being the best kind of escapist story because it takes you someplace you think you want to go to get away from your troubles. And then in the end, you end up walking out, hopefully armed to deal with your troubles in the real world. I hate things that are escapist entertainment that make us feel like we solved a problem. And you're coming out of the theater going, boy, I'm glad we slayed that dragon. But it's like, no, you didn't slay shit. And you're not a rebel.
Yeah, and New Tomorrow. And by the way,
popcorn bucket.
Sorry. By the way, Anthony, just if you have any questions, thoughts, or anything you want to, just please jump in. This isn't just
Anthony has left the chat.
Yeah,
I'm not. I just love listening. Shut up. I just love listening to this guy talk. We go back to
But I will say too that New Tomorrow has more of it's not a real obvious connection to the times that we live in, but that's one of the things that I think is smart about it is that you don't have to read into that, but if you pick up on that stuff, you can, and it's really just in the sense of that this idealized period of American history being retold in a way that also marches them into the forces of the capitalist robber barons. And that's a huge part of the villainy of this story, and
Yes.
which is unfortunately it cuts really close to what we're dealing with in the real world when we have President Robert Barron and the richest man in the world who are having public internet dick fights. At
Isn't
the
that
same,
fucking insane?
yeah, it's the most insane thing.
It's there. I found all of this historical stuff that I wasn't just looking for parallels, but it blew my mind how like the technocrat party movement, and then General Smedley Butler, and the coup plot against Roosevelt, which Amsterdam kind of explores with mixed results. It's weird that they cast Robert De Niro as their Smedley Butler. But the thing is, there were all of these historical moments that were enormous teachable moments that unless you live on the History Channel, you're never going to see. That I found myself, a big part of this story wrote itself, or at least, wrote itself back out of history, like the bonus army, the bonus march, which it astounded me how few people had ever heard of this moment. And I'll leave people to explore it or read the book. But it's a pivotal event in the book, and how these things echo and are timeless, and how weirdly, compelling American amnesia is, and how we keep stumbling into the same tar pits. Is really a mind-boggling thing, and I didn't want to make it into a lecture, but that kind of a framework. I mean, pulp usually the setting is just kind of a comical background. It's not. It's a masquerade party. It doesn't really reflect real events and stuff, and yet real events at that time were, as now, as crazy as any pulp or soap opera plot. And that kind of addiction to spectacle is the kind of thing that makes these big grand narratives to me compelling. I mean, look at our fascination with and our utter current dissatisfaction with superheroes and what superheroes are supposed to deliver as an escapist thing, and like the controversy about Superman, about who Superman is and what he represents and who he stands for, and everybody has their own notion of it, and it's a weird kind of once is tragedy, second time is farce, because if you look at Zack Snyder really tried to push Superman as like a 21st century Jesus, and who kills and fucks. But this interpretation of Superman, just noting facts in his origin story, is something that people are angry about, and putting Trump's face on David Corn Sweats, and it's weird because we're angry at our toys, because our toys are supposed to deliver us away from all of these things that are on fire in the house, and we clearly don't know or don't want to put out these fires. We want our toys to take us away, and our toys aren't taking us away, because you can't really look at these toys without being reminded, half your house is on fire, little baby. What are you going to do about that?
Well, and the Snyder thing was really funny too, because like he didn't even get the original, and he strayed away from the original intention of the writer and producers of his Man of Steel, who wanted to do like, what if everyone was afraid of Superman because he was an alien, right? And then it turned into he's a Superman who kills and fucks, and like and that became, you know, a little bit more of his intention. And here, so we have tons of media commenting on what superheroes can be and can't be and those things, but what you have, the way the world views superheroes has changed since you originated this project, just because those are 18, you know, years with a fuck ton of superheroes being introduced into the lexicon.
Sure.
How did that change? And let's talk about the heroes that you have, from Kid Aniba and the White Devil and Silver Sentry and really cool superheroes. So, you know, this is obviously a cast that of characters that you could really build off of. You know, but how did it?
Yeah. And their you know, their antecedents are pretty obvious. The Silver Sentry owes a lot to the Rocketeer, which was itself, you know, a latter-day homage to 1930s serials. And I wrote a Rocketeer story for IDW back in the day. And you know, and the White Devil owes a lot to the Shadow and the Spider and a lot of those other kind of shadowy two gunslinging vigilantes. And Kid Amoeba is you know, kind of owes a lot. I mean, the Heap and Swamp Thing and other, you know, monsters as protagonists. And there's also the Haywire Gang, who are as much victims of a horrible accident as they are superheroes. But definitely, I think superheroes in the sense that they're called upon to do something that seems impossible and suicidal to them. And this is, I mean, one of the things I tried to touch on in New Tomorrow is that weird paradox of superheroes when they become iconic, which is one of my least favorite words now, just because you always can tell you're reading shitty AI slop copy when it says it's known for being iconic. It's like, to whom? You don't even have eyes. You don't look at things. But but the notion that these characters resonate and with things that you loved before, while speaking to a new time and speaking with more frankness to an audience about the times that they live in and the nature of heroism. I wanted to convey this weird dissatisfaction, or at least an awareness of how our notion of heroism itself is a lie as broad as anything in fantasy. Because you think about, I mean, like Steve Rogers, poor son of a bitch can't even die, right? I mean, yeah. he got brought back. He was encased in ice, and he was completely lost, and he has to continue to fight America's battles long after his day should be done, and he deserves to retire. And all of these characters keep getting retconned and renewed because they can't we can't let them die. And whenever they try to replace older characters with newer, younger ones, the readers end up rejecting them. And so you can't die until you become boring or irrelevant. And in reality, history, eats up heroes and shits out history. It uses up people. Every big fight that you have will smash up your body to a degree that you're never going to be the same again. Whereas comics and pulps and novel series with characters down to like Jack Reacher today demand that guy recovers completely in between issues and is back and ready to fight even bigger menaces down the line.
And maybe here's your blurb, Cody, but
yeah,
nobody else is gonna eat up superheroes and shit history like you can. And and New Tomorrow is a great alchemy of lots of things that are uniquely like suited for you, which is wanting to write superheroes that are different, weird, and edgy. Having this detailed sense or idea of the history of the era and an interest in that, and also is extremely well read in the pulps of that era. And for that reason, all those things together make New Tomorrow specifically something that somebody else might have been able to think of the concepts, but nobody else is going to be able to jam that package together and eat superheroes and shit history, right? Like you will.
Man.
Yeah,
I am fulfilled.
Well, and that's what I say this wholeheartedly that the thing that I felt most excited about reading this book is that nobody else could have written this. Absolutely nobody else could have written this. Yeah.
No, and they also couldn't have put it together, I think, in the way that you put this book together. Purely from a structural standpoint, all these seemingly disparate characters who all come together towards the end is pretty impressive, considering everything going on in the book, considering how many characters there are, considering how big the book is, but like it doesn't read as big as it looks. Like it's a pretty incredible, and I'm really, like David said, I really don't know if anybody else could have pulled this off.
Could they have though?
Yeah,
we're only just beginning to discover all the many myriad of reasons why nobody else could have done this. But I mean, it is a big ask. It's not as long, not quite as long as Un-America actually, but it's almost my longest book, and it was the first book that everybody I handed an art copy to, their first remark was, "Wow, that's really thick." Yeah. But all of those same people have read it and are hooked on it in a way that it's exactly what I was hoping for. I once heard David Brin, noted award-winning science fiction author, also based in San Diego for a long time, once said that when he gives out manuscripts to his first readers, he doesn't ask them for what worked, what didn't, or criticism or notes or typos or anything. Just tell me when you put the bookmark in the book and when you started reading it again. And so he wants to, then he will look at those spots where they said they put down the book and address those as the weak points. Whatever they say the book needs, whatever. Anybody can tell you when something doesn't work. Almost nobody can tell you what you should do. But he looks at those points where they got out. This is a trap they escaped. And I did, as big as it is, I was always thinking about making every chapter, sewed with a trap so that you have to come back. So that you're constantly looking at these four characters, and every one of them falls out of the, different kind of frying pan into a different kind of fire every chapter, so that you stick to it, or why the hell do it? I don't know.
Well, and one of the things about the reason why I think people think it feels bigger and longer is that there's, it used to be that big books were considered like what the publishing industry wanted, but now they want exactly 320 pages, like to a T. And so people have gotten used to these 320 page books. And so anytime anything is a little bit thicker, people think it's a doorstop. And, it is longer, but I would say it's epic in scope, and it carries the weight. One of the reasons I asked Anthony to be here, besides an excuse to get him back here, is that Anthony, you were one of the early eyes on this book, even before. I mean, I got it pretty early, but you got it really early because you helped do.
I read it on my laptop.
Yeah,
He helped talk me out of some really dumb shit.
yeah. So, but you helped it, and listen.
Never have I been handed a more daunting, intimidating task than to, hey, read this book from one of your long-standing influences and a good friend of yours, and then say what you don't like, what doesn't work, and how to fix it. I was like, it's funny. I initially, I told Dan, let me think about it because I don't know if I'm right to do this. Like I don't know if like I'm the right person for this.
But we both agreed that you were. We just knew it had to be cozened out of you a little bit. But in the end, you gave very honest and penetrating insights that did make it a better book.
Well, and that's the thing is that, and I had this experience because we wrote a book together, Anthony, and so you always feel absolutely free to tell me something's bullshit if I give you something, and that's one of the most people get the wrong idea when you say trusted reader. A trusted reader, a lot of times, is the person who's going to tell you something's bullshit if it's bullshit, or tell you that something sucks if it sucks.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to sound reductive about it either. Just for anybody listening, like you can say like, I mean, I've known you guys for so long. I can say to you, hey, this doesn't work, but I'm not going to tell you this shit sucks and then not explain why. Like right. you have to be able to tell the person you're working with, hey, this doesn't work. Here's why. Maybe try X, Y, and Z. And like don't be just like sucks 1 star. Like, I hate that shit. I hate when people are like, oh, I didn't like it. Okay, what would you have rather seen? I don't know. Well, get fucked.
Right. You could say that even the best books by the best writers need an outside eye a lot of times because we're so close to the books that, you know, a lot of times if there is a mistake or a problem, the writer's the last person that's going to see it because, you know, they've lived inside.
You've been so close to it. And also... Mm-hmm. How it feels. We get so close to the logistics and stuff, and it's like working out a travel itinerary, and everything locks up logically, but you can lose touch with the emotional impact of the story until somebody else comes in fresh and tells you, yeah, no, I hated this guy. I was really excited about this. You know, this part you kind of dwelt on, but it's important to be able, and this is why you should put something away, you know, after a first draft is completed, especially if it was a difficult book, so that you can go back in and feel it, not just see what works and what doesn't, but see how it makes you feel, because that's what is going to make anything in it memorable. You could spend a lot of time working out the puzzle and solving everything and showing your work, and it works like a geometry proof. But if nobody feels it, they're not going to remember it, and they're not going to tell anybody about it.
Yeah. And last night, what I did for that one was I put it away for, I don't know, 6 months, and then I took the train to Portland, and I worked on. I just went through the draft on the train to Portland in a sleeper car.
Yeah.
And I worked on it all the way to Portland, and then I think I finished it on as we were passing Santa Barbara on the way back. And you know, I worked, you know, getting outside of it and seeing it a couple months later was definitely super important, and I recommend that to all writers. But Anthony, who's your favorite of the superhero characters in New Tomorrow?
Oh, Silver Sentry is probably my favorite character.
Aw.
I love Kid Amoeba, but I also like the backstory on White Devil, and how it like kind of passes on with the mask. I really liked that, so I put that out there. That you know, and I mentioned this because I want people to look for these things, like if they read it, like you know, these are characters that we super dug. And this is, and having you here, Anthony, too, it's interesting because Cody's in the position, of course, he's trying to sell his book, but we could talk about it on the outside as people who read it, loved it, and enjoyed it. And
well, yeah, and Cody, correct me if I'm wrong. I think maybe I'm misreading this, but what I kind of really love about Silver Century is that she has a very rigid kind of belief system about herself, but she doesn't really realize that she's just as nuts as the White Devil, just in a completely different way.
Yes, and
I good.
Oh no, please go ahead. You go ahead.
I know. I was just gonna say that these types of characters, these types of honest representations of people, the fact that you're not trying to make the audience overly sympathetic to her and what's happened in a way that doesn't feel honest, and so it's just I always resonate with characters who it's this person is as messed up as the person they think they're better than. They just can't see it.
Right. And so yeah, she still has room to grow. And this was a funny and tricky thing that I was trying to take on consciously in this book, which is that superheroes and characters that you identify with or root for, there's a set of techniques, and Stephanie Meyer totally stumbled upon them for Twilight. Because if you look at Bella, she's never described, and she's essentially, but everybody's telling her she's so interesting and smart and beautiful, and she's essentially a seat in amusement park ride, because you become Bella when you read the character. And presumably kids reading comic books would identify with, you are Superman, you are Batman, you're the one fighting evil and saving the day. And maybe that's the reason I ever identify with a character in a superhero comic book to where I really saw myself in them until I first read an issue of Swamp Thing. But I wanted for these characters to invite you in and to make you care about who they are and what they're facing and what it costs them to be more than they were. But at the same time, there is a barrier, because they are who they are, and they're shaped by these things, and they're shaped by choices that you might not have made. And it's the difference between making a ride for readers and making an experience for readers. But I hope that people who are interested enough in the concept of the trope of superheroes and why we love them, and why we also feel kind of cheated or short sold by them, or corporate exploitation of same, to be kind of a thing that this does. If you're looking to be Superman in a thing, this is probably not the book for you. But yeah, if you want to know what the fuck is up with Superman, if you want to know how nuts you'd have to be to see this as a real option, as a duty, even if it was possible, then yeah, I hope you'll get something rewarding out of this.
Yeah, then that's hold on, David. That's kind of what I going back to what we were talking about earlier. That's what I've resonated with me with your work since Wasted on the Young, and really in The Man Who Escaped the Story and Other Stories, that whole collection.
Yeah.
You really you're incredible at showing people from creating characters who aren't going to resonate, who somebody can't just drop themselves into, right? This is a wholly lived character, and there may not be somebody you like. You may read New Tomorrow and be like, oh, I really wanted to not think of the White Devil as an asshole, but kind of an asshole sometimes, right? Probably the least the least problematic character. I say problematic, but is probably Kid Amoeba. He's probably, if anything, right? He would be the most least emotionally broken,
the least complicated, and in the essence that it was that I call it an it very consciously. Its pronouns are it and its. But it becomes infected essentially with sentience and self-awareness, and the longer it's trapped on Earth, the better it gets at imitating us and walking among us, and yet it loses its own understanding of what it's supposed to be, which is, what most of life is, which is just an organism that responds to threats and prey and opportunities to reproduce, and to become this self-aware thing that then comes to have notions of responsibility. Like it learns a lot of who it is from listening to radio shows, and listening to other hobos talk when it's riding the rails and things. And so it gets a very deformed notion of what humanity is and what it takes to live amongst people without being hunted and hated all the time. Mm-hmm. And I felt like when I gave this book to my agent, when I still had an agent, she was enthusiastic, but at the same time thought, you need to cut it, and you need to probably just cut some whole characters and storylines. And she was like, just lose, I'm like, which leg should I chew off, Janet? And she was like, yeah, I think you should lose Kid Amoeba and the Haywire Gang. And at one point I was thinking, just probably largely because of piss and vinegar, of rewriting the thing solely from the point of view of Kid Amoeba. But I was still laboring under the delusion that that epic science fiction and epic fantasy can earn, a longer page count if it has a grander story to tell. And I hunger to read those kind of things, even if I can't make the time in my day to read them. I've been reading Stephen Baxter's The Time Ship, I think now for 5 months. I finished, a half a dozen other books in that time, but it's an epic, extraordinary, and very picaresque kind of a expansion of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And it's been a wonderful experience. And I think there is still room for those kinds of books, but it's harder and harder to convince people to put down a video game controller or put down, AI that lets them create these big fat books that nobody's going to read and read somebody else's. And so the onus is on us to make that weight actually give them something that nothing else can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that is the challenge for all writers is to make something that can't be ignored or which is hard. And I will tell you though that I wouldn't have wanted to have lost either of these characters, because I think part of the whole concept is that you have a team of superheroes, that you need the whole team, and that's really important. So we're gonna do a little bit of spoiler talk, but before we go to that, we should tell people, give some of our closing thoughts a little early, just because some people will be pausing this and going and reading the book and coming back. So just to close out, Anthony, what's the last thing you want to tell people about New Tomorrow, or what you've got going on?
I think if you're tired of all the superhero slop that's been kind of blasted across the screen, you're looking for complex characters in an amazing, well-researched, very it looks big, but this book moves fast. There you go, right there. And it's got I love, I've told Cody this already, I think, but I love the opening chapter of this book. The opening chapter is one of my favorite moments of the book. It rips. It's so good. And I think yes, if there's some escapism there, of course, but if you're also kind of looking to feel hopeful about our current situation in the world, this book will resonate with you quite a bit.
Well, I'll say in the spoiler section of the chapter, that was my favorite, but I will say that for spoilers. But and Anthony, where do you want folks to find you if you want them to find you, or do you not give a shit?
I don't care.
Yeah.
He'll be at the Ha Ha Hut in Oxnard, California, Wednesday.
That's right. I'll be doing 5 minutes every 10 minutes by the buffet.
And he'll be at the Multnomah County St. John's Library as part of his community service. Yes, indeed.
He doesn't live on that side of town. Yeah.
Not yet.
You can find him as a recently minted member of Movie Madness in Portland.
That's right.
You can find him there a lot.
I'm gonna start bucking for a job over there.
Yeah.
Hire me to get your movies.
Oh yeah, I can see the wonderful interactions you would have with the patrons at Movie Madness when you're renting this.
I pity you.
I pity you. Yeah. Cody, where can people find this book, and what do you want them to know?
Well, it's available. We hope that folks will step over the world's third richest man and his dazzling toupee and buy it directly from the source. If you go to forbiddenfutures.com or oddness.us, you can order it directly from us. And you can go to codygoodfellow.com to find out updates. And that's where you can find me. But I'm going to be promoting the hell out of this book and a few other short story appearances that I have coming up. And word coming from down the trail is a collection of my weird Western Cthulhu mythos stories will be coming out from Hippocampus, maybe just before the end of this year. It'll be called The Greedy Grave and others.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
So on that note, I don't know how long we'll go on spoilers, but we're going to switch over to spoilers. So if you have not read New Tomorrow, you can go buy it, pause this interview, and then come back just in case we let something slide that you didn't want to hear about ahead of time. I'm going to say that, okay, we're now in spoilers, that my favorite chapter was, and it's funny because I thought it was the moon at first, but this, so a lot of this world takes like a turn from ours, not just with the superheroes, but with the invention of teleportation is a huge part of the switch for the alternate history, and where the super rich oligarch meeting where they get teleported to another planet. That is definitely my I thought that scene was really great. And what felt really like, oh shit, is because I knew you wrote that years ago probably, but when we're dealing with like an oligarch basically buying the government, an oligarchic system of like buying the government and destroying it, this whole scene of this this tech bro inventor from another era, just basically telling like all the powerful people in the world, like, I've got you by the balls, was a really powerful scene. How long ago was that was that always a part of the story from the beginning, or when did that come about?
I knew it was going to be a part of the story. I wrote that part of it in probably summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of approaching that era not nearly as explicitly or cartoonishly as we are currently.
Right.
But when I did it, I was trying to look at how, new money would show up old money. And I was reading a lot of like F. Scott Fitzgerald and historical treatments on the Great Depression, and how at the congressional hearings, how many of these guys could not account for any of their their finances and where their money came from and where it went, and how they were old money. And looking at, it's an alternate history book, not in like the very classical sense, like the Harry Turtledove sense, where you're using history and you alter one key pivotal event and then look at how everything changes pursuant to that. It was more the kind of alternate history like steampunk, where it takes the fictional conceits and the imagination and the dreams, the unfulfilled desires of that age, and says, well, what if that fantasy was history? And so this book is very much a what you'd call a diesel punk book, which is kind of an underexploited genre, not nearly as popular as steampunk, because it's just easier to glue aluminum foil gears onto hats and get some blast goggles from Home Depot. But the idea that the hubris, the very old world certainty that they could perfect the world and invent and create anything and solve all the world problems, blew up in their face in a much more souped up and gnarly World War I. And so America has the benefit of all these snazzy technologies. You know, if you're wealthy enough, you can fly to work in an airplane. And there's instant food and a lot of other things, but they're frippery. It always kind of blew my mind how in every issue of Iron Man back in the Silver Age, Tony Stark would invent this new thing that was fantastic and it would change everything. And then Stiltman shows up and he goes off to fight Stiltman and he forgets about it. And there's starving children standing up in front of his factory going, didn't you invent a machine that makes food out of pollution? You know, but he forgets that every month. And so it's just to establish how smart he is and how he's always on the cutting edge of saving everything. And or in Fantastic Four, Reed Richards invents something and then Ben Grimm throws a temper tantrum and breaks it. And then they go off to the negative zone. But looking at how the amnesia of pulps, the need for it's an escape. It's not really building a sustained world where things can really get going. Requires miracles to happen and then unhappen every day. And that's kind of the mindset that human beings have. I think it was Jason Pargan who noted this most astutely, that if movies have really fucked our brains, it's falling into this notion that a 3-act structure can solve any problem, where there's a problem, we're faced by it, we face off against it, it gets complicated, then we really kick in and connect with our values, and then we slay the dragon and we beat it and everything's fine again. And we're beset by this host of problems that will not respond to a 3-act structure. Superman flies backwards around the earth and saves Lois Lane, kind of a solution. And that's really all that we're prepared to offer anymore. And I tried with New Tomorrow to do a superhero book where it looks at certainly not real problems, but how solving real problems is more complicated than that, and it demands more, and it might cost us everything. And facing that real possibility of, is this problem worth my life? Because we've been taught by fantasy and adventure fiction that the moment that you commit and say this is worth my life, you might even die, but everybody in the theater will clap and you'll come back again, like Tinkerbell. And we need to be able to reckon on the notion that solving a problem and saving the day might cost you your life, and and no matter who claps, you might not come back. And this is the kind of thing that I think when I see how fiction is really blowing up, there's been a generational turn in the last several years where they're pumping a lot of authors who had not yet learned to read when we first were starting to write are blowing up. And I celebrate that, and I think it's fantastic. But at the same time, I realize that as you get older, your experiences force you to take life and death more seriously. And that's why I think older authors continue to have more to offer if they're looking honestly into the void and looking into their future. And this was something I tried to bring to this. It was weird trying to write, characters who are half my age and not be condescending, but at the same time be figuring out how you lead them down this path to where they're going to recognize, wow, I am it's not a question of whether I'm going to die like this. It's a question of how I'm going to die.
Well, I had that writing. I was working on the sequel to Last Night to Kill Nazis, and my main character is a Jewish, like, OSS commando, right, guy. But
Right.
And then I started thinking about the fact that he's like 25, 26 years old at the time,
Right?
because just of the he got recruited at 19 years old, like or they're 20 years old in the war, so he's probably even younger, actually. But I knew I was very conscious and aware of how young he was,
Right.
through making all these decisions about life and death and war through all this. And then there's a part where I just had to reckon with the fact that before the war started, he was a teenager,
Right.
just a teenager.
And there's a very strong temptation to, just because if you're writing a Rock'em Sock'em adventure story, to just forget about that stuff. This guy wants to do the thing. He wants to solve the plot. He is a willing agent in the adventure. But
the only thing that saved my character on that is that we were at the end of the war and he had been in it for a long time. So, but you still got to think about that. And I do want to move on to, before I forget, just because I might forget about this, the quotes at the beginning of the chapter. Some are real, some are obviously made up, because I'm like, there's no way so and so said that, or they're reacting to something that's in universe or whatever.
Unless it was a within universe one, and I think there were only a couple of those. Those are all real.
Okay. Yeah.
Those are all real.
Okay.
Yeah. I kept a journal when I was doing my research for the whole 18 years, where I collected some. But some of the things that you hear people say or admit, saying the quiet part out loud, I can get half the working class to fight the other half with my money in my pocket. Those were real, and betrayed how people really thought about things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm trying to think of which one I thought had to be. I think there was one that it was the timing, I think, of it, like where somebody was no longer alive or something. I don't remember, but I thought it was ingenious too, because it made me start paying more attention. Because a lot of times those quotes at the beginning of chapters or song lyrics at the beginning of chapters, I just ignore them.
Right. Sure.
I'm like,
you shouldn't. Those are so expensive.
Yeah,
that was what Skip told me, was that one of the biggest things that they blew a lot of their money on was those fancy song quotes. And
and so. Yeah, that is an interesting thing. Anthony, is there anything from the spoiler wise that you really want to bring up?
I don't know. I don't think there's anything spoiler wise. Cody, I meant to ask you this when we were talking earlier. How was it kind of writing the Haywire Gang for you and keeping those kind of personalities kind of all distinctly different, but being, clearly molded from the same man?
Right. That was the funniest part of the book, and probably the part that I leaned on the most, and had to kind of defend to myself and to a few other people, because it seems kind of like we were pausing the plot to watch a Three Stooges 2-reeler periodically. But I felt like that was important for capturing both a part of that era, but also, what is it like to be trapped in a plot like this if you're just a regular person? I mean, some superheroes are like, they're impervious to bullets and they can fly and stuff. And other people, it's like, I can sit on a box of ice cream and tell you what flavor it is. I have no protective abilities or anything. I'm fine until I stop a single bullet. But I loved these characters enough to keep them in it and make them kind of the heart of the story as we go into it, because they are the guys that actually wanted to be superheroes, or the guy that they were. I mean, it's a spoiler. We're spoiling it. So the Haywire gang is three identical triplets who seem to possess this innate entropy power, where when the more riled up they get, or the closer together they get, or God forbid they touch each other, everything, causality around them gets fucked up. Every complicated machinery breaks, things go wrong. And they only gradually come to realize that they are the same guy. You know, that episode of Star Trek where Kirk goes through the transporter and it's busted, and there's a good Kirk and a bad Kirk.
Written by Richard Matheson, by the way.
Yeah. It's his id and his super ego, but it's like weird because James Kirk was just all ego before. But so I break the guy up into thirds, and he's essentially the id, the ego, and the super ego, and they're trying to find their place in the world. None of them remembers who they were before, or where they came from, or how they got that way. But they were once this naive bohunk himbo cub reporter who wanted adventure and wanted action, and he read pulp science fiction books when he should have been doing his research and stuff, and he daydreamed about, you know, following the Bonnie and Clyde gang across the Midwest on their campaign of terror, and exposing and capturing John Dillinger. And so he's the reader of a pulp novel who becomes a character in a pulp novel, and his or their picaresque misadventures, bumbling on their way towards the climax of the book, felt like something as a counterpart to, and to make it more than just an homage to pulp adventure, but also just to live in that world. And it was kind of my slapstick way to try to make this a great American novel. At the time that I was writing it, during really bearing down during the lockdown, one of the ways that I coped was I watched a lot of old Preston Sturges and screwball comedies from the 30s, and I watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou at least a dozen times, and the kind of camaraderie of these hapless dipshits trapped in a world that they never made, that is so full of shabby traps that they keep sticking their noses into, and capturing that kind of runaway manic mayhem that was always just under the surface of modern life in the Depression. If you look at things like Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers, there was this kind of everybody was one fountain pen squirt of ink in the eye away from becoming a homicidal maniac. And capturing that, or at least examining that, or examining this world through that lens, seemed like a really neat counterpoint to the Silver Century and the White Devil, and maybe kind of redundant with Kid Amoeba, but because both of them are sort of just blank slates in a world that's out to get them, but they both come out of the same event. And so I love them carnally.
Yeah, I thought the Haywire gang were a really interesting and fun part of it, and enjoyed that aspect of it too. And I think again, White Devil was clearly one of my favorites. But is there anything about so one thing too that I think that DickHeads will enjoy is that the world building, we sometimes forget what a master of world building that PKD was, and he did it mostly by having the world act upon the characters. Like that's one of the reasons why his characters were working class, is that this was another way to explain the world without, like, dumbing it down.
Breaking out the history books. It's all in media res inside the actions. And
yeah. And so another PKD aspect of, or something that is Dick related that I think our listeners will enjoy, is how because it's a Great Depression story, even though it's a world that gets out of the Great Depression thanks to this new invention, so much of the world building is done through the interactions with how this society is acted upon this wide array of characters. So that is something that I think DickHeads should enjoy. That's a more subconscious thing. A lot of times I it's funny because Anthony and I always came at PKD and our aspect of covering PKD on the podcast as, we look at Phil as the writer. A lot of people look at Phil as the mystic and the pink beam writer and all that. And we always looked at Phil as the writer.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know, Cody, I've always kind of seen you as someone in between there. But you certainly understand the writer in him, and I think that people will enjoy that world building aspect of it. The world building in this book is very good. So I just wanted to. I probably should have said that before spoilers, but
yeah, and it never hinders the flow of the book. Like, how you're reading like something in like one of those Song of Ice and Fire books where there's whole paragraphs that are like, and this is what they ate for dinner, and that came from this, which came from that, which was technically a political thing tied to this. Yeah, it's never that. Like, we don't dead stop the novel to world build. It's all there as background, and it's all pretty organic in how it shows up. I felt like.
Yeah.
I think there was one thing we talked about cutting, Cody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that article, if I remember correctly?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Damon Runyon article, and that was, I did insist on keeping that in there just because I'm a big fat show off, but also I felt like it needed a moment where we pause and step out of their actions and just see what the world sees. When they see this wonderful invention, because we're seeing behind it and seeing these misbegotten side effects of this runaway technology. But I couldn't resist wanting to just pause for a moment and see, how would regular people first hear about this thing? Wow, and there's a neat spread in Time magazine where they did a press junket, and they get a few dozen reporters, and they fed them with rather shabby fare at a reception, and then they all go through a revolving door, and they emerge on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and they see Josephine Baker dancing in her bananas, and then they go from there to Italy for dinner, and then they go from there to the banks of the Nile to watch camels race and belly dancers dance, and then they go from there to Japan for morning tea as the sun rises over Mount Fuji, and then they go back to New York, and it's the same afternoon. And to be able to try to present how the man in the street is going to see this mind-bending technology that offers unlimited potential, not just to go anywhere in the world, but to go between worlds. It is something that a leaner book could have done without it, but I couldn't.
Well, and I think
this is a fat fucking book.
Yeah. It doesn't read like a fat book, but
thanks. But that's something I've always tried to do.
Yeah, and I think I understand your argument for, like, pulling it out, and sometimes that there are arguments for an info dump, and done in a stylistic way. But I think the majority of the world building in this book is very natural and very much part of.
And that wasn't world building. It's a zing zang zingo travelogue as written in the voice of Damon Runyon, who is one of those, like, along with Ring Lardner. We there's a few early 20th century voices, Dorothy Parker and the Algonquin Round Table, or at least a few of them, who are still celebrated just for being wonderful prose stylists. But Damon Runyon was the pants for doing like courtroom journalism. The way he describes somebody, just from their hat to their socks, and give you everything else you needed to know about what kind of person they were. And I was, along with the pulps, I was trying to pay tribute to that, because that was something that kind of witty literacy, even in yellow journalism, that we have sacrificed at our peril, was something I was kind of trying to pay homage to, but also kind of reawaken interest in. We were really, really, really good at telling stories, and we become really good at a lot of other things that are distractions from that. But again, at our peril.
Yeah. I think this book, is top notch. It's top notch storytelling, and Cody, you made it easy for me to get behind this book and really promote it.
Thanks, man.
I feel really, it's funny because it's great when something that you've been hearing about for 18 years can live up to the hype. So that's always a good thing.
Thanks. Yeah. I hope it finds an audience.
So,
it's come out from Oddness, which is a very small but very dedicated and stylish publisher, and I'd put it up against. I mean, I could sneak it on the table at Barnes and Noble, and it could be mistaken for a Big Four New York book. The presentation's good, but it's going to be an uphill battle, because people generally assume if a book comes from a really small publisher, it's because the really big publishers didn't want it. And the few that I did try with this book after the lockdown, most of them didn't get back to me at all, or they gave me a peremptory, yeah, we're just not interested. Good luck with that. But I really do have to believe that indie publishers can offer something that, I mean, for a more narrow targeted audience, but can give them bigger thrills than anything from New York is going for, because even the edgier, mid-list publishers are still kind of playing it safe, or finding new ways to play it safe, looking for new formulas. And I've always kind of tried to swim upstream and try to bottle something that I wanted that nobody else was doing. And I'm grateful to anybody who's willing to take the ride. I think if you're looking for something different that scratches itches that you forgot you had, this could do it better than anything you'd find at the airport.
On that note, Cody, I believe you worked all night, and we need to get you to sleep at some point here. Anthony, you have any last words?
No. Happy to be here. Happy to see you guys.
Good to see you too, brother. If anybody up there gives you any shit, tell them to come to me.
We're working on some other things to bring Anthony back around, so we'll see where the future unfolds on that. But as always, dickheads, keep it paranoid, stay paranoid, and we will talk again in the near future. So thank you for reading New Tomorrow.